Breece Hall eruption. The Bengals look decent. DeVon, Achane continues to be explosive. And Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp return. Two different outcomes. That's what we're going to talk about today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find Stealing Signals at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his work at RotoViz. Shawn, we're recording our Sunday night recap of a big, exciting Week 5, the first bye week, or first week with teams on bye. You always talk about how we want to build these rosters that can be explosive through the byes. It felt like everyone's rosters were explosive this week, but our team certainly scored a lot of points. There were points to be scored. It felt to me, for the first time, like this season had a little bit of rhythm to it, I guess. Like stuff that I expected to happen happened, which is, it's a good feeling on Sunday.
It definitely is. And I mean, so much of the last 2 years and first month, the theme really has been the haves and the have-nots. And you had to have players on teams that were functional to be successful. And we're not saying that that's going away. It still very much helps. You think about the Miami Dolphins, and I mean, you've got a rookie running back who is in a battle for he's in a battle with the fastest player in the NFL to see who can average more yards per touch. When you're a running back battling a great wide receiver, that is tricky. Miami Dolphins setting records for yardage through the first 5 weeks of a season. It helps to be on that team. And yet the great thing about Week 5 is that some of the bad teams actually came to play and at least scored some points for a week. So that part was wonderful. And you think about some of the things, especially for 3 weeks, that looked really bad. And one of the things about a football game is that it's a somewhat small sample, even though, you're going to get somewhere in that 50, 60, 70 play range. You're going to get, really just a handful of possessions. Things can happen that make you feel really good or really bad about a player. And when you think about it, DJ Moore and what he's had to go through with Carolina, and then how poorly Justin Fields and the Bears started this season, they have the game against the Broncos. You're thinking, well, that's just because it's the Broncos. For them to come out on Thursday night, I mean, there were so many points scored on Sunday that it's easy to forget that DJ Moore scored 49 points on Thursday night. And I mean, Sam Howell actually had a fantastic game, and if it wasn't overshadowed by how well Justin Fields played and how incredibly poorly the Commanders' defense played, I mean, he would be a lot the story. I mean, if De'Ami Brown catches that long touchdown, if Jahan Dotson goes over the top and makes a play, and there were a couple of plays there to be made. Logan Thomas dropped the ball in the bucket to him, doesn't make a play that would have gotten him down to the 2-yard line.
The De'Ami Brown one, I put on Howell entirely. He had a lot of room to the wide side of the field and threw it upfield and missed long. You can't miss over the top on that throw. He's got the safety beat to the middle of the field. I was
receivers got to make that play. The receivers.
That was a tough play.
I mean, it's set up there for you. You got a lot of time with the ball in the air. De'Ami Brown is blazing speed. Got to get there. You got to make the play. But yeah, and obviously everything would have been different from there on. I mean, maybe big picture, he ends up with more. Anyway, Thursday night was
great. I was getting
razzed.
We have the live ship chasing watch party. I was getting razzed about DJ Moore because this is the first year that I wasn't really on him. But I wasn't even like, I was so thrilled for him. I've defended him for years and years. You mentioned this last week that even though I didn't draft a lot of him this year, it turned into like how much do you have on Underdog of DJ Moore for each of us that were on stream, and I looked it up and I have like 4%. So I mean, I have a little bit of him, but not a ton. Obviously, I mean, that's definitely underweight. But I was telling a lot of people and writing about the reasons that I didn't think he could be successful. But just watching him being able to thrive in a situation that works for his skill set was just, I mean, just as a fan, you mentioned this last week. I've always been a big fan of this guy. And I can be completely honest, like it's hard sometimes when you watch guys that you don't have a lot of exposure to doing really well. But I was just legitimately really excited for him. It was cool.
It was a wonderful game. And I think it also reminds us that when you have a track record with the players. Now, the track record for DJ Moore for the last couple of years has really been pretty bad, right? But you think about even Justin Fields, for example, the caliber of the arm, what he did as a passer in college, what he did as a runner last year, how explosive the offense can be there. I mean, if they continue to play 2 or 3 more really bad games, that would have been a huge problem. I mean, it's a huge problem that they've lost so many games. They've lost like 14 games in a row, something like that. I mean, that's not like some insignificant little thing. But when we think about these guys bouncing back, and we also kind of think about, and one of the themes of week 5, if you want to think occasionally from a best ball perspective, we don't tend to talk about it from that orientation, doing these shows in season. But I mean, this was a big week for managers who drafted a good team overall. You'd still need a good team around them. But if you played that Bears Falcons week 17 game as a thesis for building a decent chunk of your best ball teams, this was a huge week. And Ben, I actually got bored as I was working through and stopped watching around halftime of this Texans-Falcons game. But even then, and even at the beginning, you had a better performance from Desmond Ridder. And one of the things that I think can get lost a little bit in this, because as you're about to explain, Kyle Pitts and Drake London finally started to do some of the things that they're supposed to do, along with Bijan Robinson playing well. But for me, one of the things that you really needed if you drafted a decent amount of Ridder late, which I did, was that rushing touchdown that he started the game with. And I think his ability to move, and that's one of the things we saw from Howell on Thursday night. I mean, Howell's not going to be Anthony Richardson or Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, but the ability to add some rushing on there, both from a fantasy perspective and certainly if your team is struggling like the Commanders to do any blocking for you. And one of the things that was so great about how the last couple of weeks is that he battled for 2-point conversions. I mean, he's trying to battle out of these sacks. I mean, some of it is an inability to process information at the NFL level quickly enough, and some of those sacks have to come down. But when you're looking at Howell, when you're looking at Ridder, the fact that those guys can move is an important piece to whether or not they ever make it. I don't really have any questions about Howell making it. With Ridder, I mean, he was already in some danger of getting benched, even though the coach was sticking with him. This is a huge game today for them, and it's weird because they really have been terrible. Although, the embarrassing loss last week against the Jaguars no longer looks quite as embarrassing after the Jaguars really more or less hammered the Buffalo Bills today. The end score looks close, but they hammered them. And now you have the Falcons winning a key game against a rising Texans squad. I mean, they're 3-2 now. And suddenly Desmond Ridder is in a much stronger position than he was a week ago.
I think the Jaguars thing, just to quickly comment on that, I think can pretty easily. We've seen a lot of teams look flat traveling to London, or even flat in their game coming back from London. The NFL set this up this year so Jacksonville could stay in England for a full week. They played 2 games there, and it's never been done yet. And I was really interested in this. I was talking about it a couple of weeks ago on some stuff that I didn't actually end up betting the Jaguars because the Bills have been playing such good football lately. And I was like, man, I don't really want to fade the Bills here. But I mean, the Bills apparently traveled on Friday over there. The Jaguars have been there for a whole week and getting acclimated. And that's my explanation for why the Jaguars hammered them. The Bills looked incredibly flat relative.
Well, it's a tough situation regardless. But I mean, you've got to finish your Sunday week 4 game and immediately get out there if you want to have any chance of competing in London.
Right. But
you need to practice there all week.
Yeah. The decision to travel on Friday was a very bizarre one. I mean, I know it's only 3 hours because they're in New York, I believe, but still, it's a long over intercontinental, over ocean flight, whatever. And a lot of teams have struggled with this. If you got to look at these types of things, analytics can mean a lot of different things. You look at the fact that teams traveling to London have struggled, right? I mean, West Coast teams traveling to the East Coast have often struggled at times. And anyway, there's a lot of, different ways to look at this, but did not go well for the Bills, obviously. And I think we can chalk that up to the fact that the Jaguars were in London all week and very acclimated. And I certainly think you could call that an advantage. You referenced the Falcons situation. I was just looking this up. I mentioned to you before the show that I was going to look this up for stealing signals, make a little footnote. And it was true. I assumed it had to be true. This is the first game Kyle Pitts and Drake London both got to 75 receiving yards in the same game. So huge round of applause for them. Not even 100 yards each. Neither of them got to 100 yards, but they did both get to 75. Pitts leads the team with 11 targets, 7 catches, 87 yards. London 9, 6, and 78. Jonnu Smith in the first half was kind of doing what he's been doing the last few weeks, but he winds up kind of taking a back seat a little bit, 7 targets, 6 receptions. And this is, I think, crucial because Atlanta scores 14 points in the fourth quarter. They come from behind and win. Desmond Ridder throws for 329 yards in the win. It became an integral part of a functional offense that put together scoring drives on their final 3 possessions, a touchdown with a 2-point conversion, and then they get 2 field goals after that. Anyway, that was exciting to see. It's exciting to see Kyle Pitts get to 87 yards. I'm not saying he's going to be an absolute smash the rest of the way or anything on that regard, but we've obviously talked a lot about him, Shawn, and good to see him get into the flow of things. Speaking of getting into the flow of things, I think the biggest story that we got to hit on pretty quick here is the return of the 2 superstars, and they had very different outcomes in their games. Let's start with the Colts because there's a couple players there that I want to talk about. You have been talking to me about Josh Downs. Anthony Richardson injures his shoulder, going to miss some time. We've talked about Shane Steichen's offense playing fast-paced and Richardson not being a particularly accurate quarterback, but with Minshew taking over and this team playing up-tempo and him being a little bit more accurate, a little bit more of a ball control type, he's going to have a higher completion percentage probably. Suddenly there can be a lot of completions in this offense. I think it's a massive difference, really, when you think through the design runs and the scrambles that Richardson is going to have. A lot of those dropbacks aren't even going to become pass attempts. Minshew's are going to become pass attempts at a higher rate, and then he's going to complete them at a higher rate. So suddenly you get a lot more completions probably when he's under center. Josh Downs, the guy that you've been talking up to me a little bit on some of our teams, some of our rosters, stashing him, goes 6 for 97 on 6 targets today. Looked really good. Made some nice plays. Had a 38-yard catch in this game. And I think if Minshew's going to make a couple of starts, which it seems like Richardson's probably going to miss at least like one game, he went out right away, and that shoulder it doesn't seem like anything's broken, but it does seem like it's one of those AC sprains that might take a little while. It's his throwing arm, if I'm not mistaken. Excited to see what that could mean for Downs, who's an ascending player. But the bigger story, Jonathan Taylor doesn't play a lot early, doesn't really then play a lot late because Zach Moss relatively early has the 56-yard touchdown run where he doesn't really look that explosive to be frank, but great hole opens up, goes untouched, 56 yards for a TD. Looked good throughout the game. I'm not trying to nitpick him. He has looked good, I think, throughout the season. Winds up with 195 total yards, and they basically didn't really feel any pressure to get Jonathan Taylor integrated too much. He only ends up with 7 touches. Zach Moss with 25. A little bit surprising to me, Shawn. I thought they would use Taylor quite a bit more. They brought him back. They announced the big deal, which is obviously something that they have been working on a little bit and talking about. I mean, that didn't just materialize in the last couple of days. Surprised at all that they, Zach Moss has been playing very well and the offense has been rolling, but surprised at all that they went as heavy of a Zach Moss lean over Taylor?
Yes and no, in part because Taylor is so good, and in part because, this wasn't a blowout victory. You have your backup QB in there. You have the Titans kind of sticking around. Now, they were, more or less in control. It always looked like they were going to win. But, when you have a weapon like Jonathan Taylor, I think that you want to get him out there and you want to get him going, even if it's just for next week. And at the same time, I do think that there's an element where even if everybody is now kind of on the same page and everybody feels good about it, there is still this element where if you essentially held out, and there's a way in which, and I say this as a huge Jonathan Taylor fan, if there's a way in which you didn't show up for your teammates in the first month and your new coaches and all of that kind of thing. And instead of taking like the really hard tack with you, they, let you do it. They put you on IR instead of putting you on, some other type of list. They gave you the salary that I think works well. I mean, one of the things about the trades, I mean, it sounded like, the Colts operated in vaguely bad faith on the trade element, but they did get a little bit of a sense. And I think Jonathan Taylor got a little bit of a sense, and they came to the conclusion that this is going to work better with us together. It makes sense for us to sign you to a fair deal, a good deal that he got seemingly. And already it seemed like he probably, I mean, the big thing, probably just the contract, right? But also one of the reasons that you kind of move in that direction is that the owner who you have the problem with is a little more separate. You are impressed with the new coaches. You are impressed with Richardson, the way the offense is going to work. You're excited about all of those types of things. And so I think people feel good about it. And yet, I mean, from a coaching perspective and from a team perspective, you kind of need to make that player, even if he's a star, earn it, work his way back in. And the people who have been playing well and didn't kind of hold out, as long as they're doing the types of things that Zach Moss was doing today, I mean, they're going to get to keep playing, at least for a stretch. I mean, it's very inevitable that Jonathan Taylor comes through here and ends up being the guy. It's disappointing for those of us who played him this week that it wasn't today. You could easily have seen him actually be the person who put up the stat line that Zach Moss put up.
Right.
But, I mean, there are explanations.
And I think
one of the things I noticed,
arguably he would have if he would have gotten 25 touches, right? I mean, I mean,
if you get the touch with the big hole, I mean, Jonathan Taylor runs through that hole a lot faster. One of the things I noted last week in, the zero RB universe is just that, I mean, Zach Moss actually did put up a very high rate of broken tackles with the Bills, but didn't generate yards from it. And with the Colts, it's been somewhat similar, where his broken tackle rate, his evasion rate this year has been extremely high. And yet his yards after contact going into this game were only 2.0, which that's not great. Just in general, it's certainly not good if you're breaking a lot of tackles. It means you're breaking tackles and not going anywhere. It's kind of always been the David Montgomery problem. It's kind of funny when you watch David Montgomery now and like just the psychology of some of these things and the emotions of even like which teams you root for. I'm having a hard time with it because I'm rooting for basically all the other Lions players other than David Montgomery. But in a Lions uniform, Ben, that dude looks athletic.
Yeah, he looks
Whereas
good.
in a Chicago Bears uniform, you're like, well, he's breaking tackles, but he refuses to run towards the goal line. It's like the goal line is the objective, not breaking the tackles. Anyway, these guys a little bit similar. I mean, Zach Moss can play at the NFL level. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts give him some touches over the next month, which, isn't ideal.
Yeah, the way that you described his advanced stats, it's definitely what you see. I mean, you see the impact of the Anthony Richardson effect and the Shane Steichen offense and the ways that has led to yards before contact with the Eagles over the years, and it's clearly happening here. Moss able to certainly run to space and run to daylight on some of these long runs that have been sort of set up well for him. And I've found myself watching going, man, I can't wait till Jonathan Taylor is running through some of these holes because, as he said, he's just so much more explosive. What did you think about Downs in this one? I thought he looked great, and I know you've been high on him.
Well, I didn't see all of this. I didn't see all of these receptions, but I did note that obviously he had the big game, and I've been excited for him. It's kind of funny, just, the way that talking about football works, the way that YouTube works and that kind of thing. I had made the case on Overtime recently that Josh Downs was basically Zay Flowers, if not a little better, but just not in as good an immediate circumstance. And it wasn't even supposed to be like a Zay Flowers negative. But then, we got comments on that we were Zay Flowers haters. And then I was kind of watching it, chuckling today because Zay Flowers made some plays today. He didn't lose the game for the Ravens, but it was sort of amusing when most of his targets are right there at the line of scrimmage. He did get some downfield targets today. One of them was going to be for a long score, and he just kind of fell down before the ball got there. And it was...
He had another one go right through his hands. One of the worst drops I've seen this year because he was completely stationary. It was coming right to his chest. I mean, you see guys drop balls moving, but he had kind of stopped in the middle of the zone. That was an early drop. Had another one where he was just not on the same page with Lamar, but all the receivers let Lamar down in this game.
I mean,
Rashod Bateman drops a touchdown. Nelson Aguilar drops a potential over-the-shoulder 40-plus yard touchdown. At least should have been a completion down inside the 10, right through his hands. Just terrible play by the whole Baltimore receiving corps.
You and I were joking. I was making the point that, like, when we were drafting our resurrection team this week, and that was a fun draft. Anybody who's missed that, go ahead and check that out. I do think you'll enjoy it. But that, like, I couldn't believe that somehow we were at the end of a draft and I was getting more Rashod Bateman, since he was like the most disappointing player that I had a lot of. And then the first play of the game, he gets open, they throw in the ball. And one of the problems with Rashod Bateman is that they've started just more or less phasing him out of the offense, and he runs routes and they refuse to throw in the ball. And so he gets that very first play. I'm like, all right, this is in the right direction. Maybe that draft pick works. Then they get to the end of either that drive or the next drive. And I mean, he might have been the most wide open for a touchdown.
Right.
With a pass right to him that was impossible to not catch of any wide receiver ever. And he more or less took it and, like, just threw it directly down.
I just made the case that Zay Flowers' drop was the worst ever, but I'm not going to argue with you that Bateman's might have been. It was bad. These guys.
Bad. Well, and also in competition was that one you mentioned from Aguilar, which I don't know if that would have gone for a touchdown for sure, because there was a guy there he probably was going to have to beat. That's like a 30-yard pass that – and, you know, I criticize Lamar Jackson from time to time in terms of his throw technique, in terms of his throw accuracy. Obviously, he's a very dynamic player, not criticizing the overall player, but just, you know, strengths and weaknesses, thinking through what a player is. He threw some great passes today. And that pass to Aguilar was one of the more beautiful downfield passes you will ever see. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, Aguilar just whiffed on it. And
you got to catch
you have to catch that ball.
I mean, just brutal.
Meanwhile, I mean, our guy Kenny Pickett continued to, like, throw it like it was a weird wiffle ball that had, like, part of it torn out, nowhere near any of his guys. And then, like, at the end, because of the defense and because of all those drops, he comes storming back. And it was weird too, because George Pickens looked like Pickens almost seemed to be, like, trying to make a point of how terrible Kenny Pickett was in the first three quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, he decides to play. And you're like, well, that's why we drafted him. Please have a couple more games like that.
I know. I mean, that ended up being a really nice game for him. 6 catches, 130 yards and a TD. The game winner, really, the 41-yard TD that ends up being – and, I mean, man, as much as we just talked about Lamar having all these drops, Baltimore led this entire game. Pittsburgh could not get anything going, as you noted. Baltimore has a field goal, a safety, a field goal. They're down 10-8. And then the George Pickens TD with 1:17 left. They get a 2-point conversion. They end up actually getting a field goal after that to win 17-10. But it wasn't the normal 17. They only had one offensive touchdown, 2 field goals, a safety, or 3 field goals and a safety to get there. Otherwise, they did not convert the 2-point conversion. Anyway, that's how you get to 17 in a weird fashion. And they had They didn't look like they could win this game. The Ravens had 10 points early in the second quarter, and then the Ravens couldn't finish any drive the rest of the way because nobody could catch a pass in all these key spots.
Justice Hill fumbles.
Yeah, so pretty brutal run out for Baltimore.
Don't bet against Mike Tomlin. He doesn't even need players. I mean, he does have some good players on that defense, but
it's like it's witchcraft almost. I saw some comments going into the game that Lamar always struggles with Pittsburgh. I did not think that played out. As you said, Lamar played a pretty strong game today. His numbers don't give justice to what he did. I want to get to a couple other guys, and then anything you want to get to, a couple explosive running backs that you have talked up recently, but we got to do Cooper Kupp first. 12 targets, 8 catches, 118 yards. Puka Nacua still goes 11-7, 71-1. I think the big story is the Rams did what we thought they should do. They set Van Jefferson aside. They made Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua a 1-2 punch. The Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods of 2019, I don't know, several years ago. Tutu Atwell as the sort of explosive downfield option. He only has the 2 catches for 9 yards and a TD. He had a bad drop today as well, but was able to get open. They're still using him on some of the quick short side motion, get him some free releases. He'll make a lot of sense as a third weapon alongside Kupp and Nacua. but no one else really did much in this game. Atwell has the 5 targets. Higbee goes down to 3 targets. Kyren Williams has 2. Otherwise, it's 12 for Cooper Kupp. It's 11 for Puka Nacua. Ben Skoranek had 1 oddball target in there as well. That was their whole passing game today. Those guys combined for well over half of the overall targets on Matthew Stafford's 37 passes. They have 23 targets. So kind of what we would have expected out of these two, but nice to see, right? That anytime a team operates the way that we think they should, and it seems like the efficient and intelligent way to operate, it's nice to get that feedback.
Yeah, and especially when you have a couple of players who do seem to have some stylistic similarities. One of the things with Cooper Kupp back is just very quickly you see, okay, he is operating at a different speed, and it's going to be more difficult to take him away than to take Puka away. But one of the things that's so great about this, if you have Puka, and we were lucky enough to add him to some main event teams, is just that the return of Kupp is going to make it much more difficult for teams who would have probably eventually figured out some elements of how to stop Nacua. That's going to be more difficult because everything is going to have to be shifted to stopping Kupp. He was so dynamic in the first half that, you could sense the shift from the Eagles and how much attention they had to give him the rest of the way. And then to an extent too, you got a guy coming back first game here. He's going to be a little bit gassed when he's just torching the Eagles defensive backs in the first half of that game. But as that happened, it freed up Nacua to do so many different things as, a possession threat, but also a possession threat that with Stafford's arm, you can occasionally unleash deep. Didn't really feel like, and this is one of the reasons why he was not an early draft pick in the reality draft, was not an early draft pick in the fantasy draft, but Puka is not some kind of elite athlete. And you can see that lack of explosiveness as the different players are out there running their routes. But the understanding of the offense, the understanding of the leverage, the ability to come down with tough catches. You look at that final line for Puka today, and several of those balls were more or less on the ground, and he's able to scoop them up. No problem. Several of those balls, he takes a massive hit afterward. The touchdown is one where he's got to shield off the defensive back. He's got to get both feet down in the corner of the end zone. A lot of NFL receivers do not make that catch. And so even though, it's not an elite athlete to where you can do the things that we saw Jamar Chase do today, he's going to be such a good NFL player in concert with Cooper Kupp, with Sean McVay calling the plays, with Matthew Stafford unleashing those passes. Stafford had some problems today because once they fell behind, the Eagles were able to put a lot of pressure on him, and they were able to make the Rams one-dimensional. And that, the Eagles, and Blair does just a fantastic job for any listeners who do have interest with his wrong read articles, doing the matchups. One of the things talking about going into this game, and not that this, was hidden, some kind of hidden gem you're having to dig out, but it's been so difficult to run on the Eagles this season. It continued to be that today. Once you get ahead and once they can't really run on you, then, Stafford is really, overwhelmed at some points in this game. And yet when you got those two receivers and when you have his arm talent, I think the Rams are going to go on a real run. And if there's going to be a team, I haven't necessarily, as we're recording this, looked forward at the schedule, but if there's a team that, maybe doesn't have the results they would like through 5 weeks, but could rip off 6-7 game winning streak, the Rams have actually looked very good in their losses, which is different than a lot of teams. There are a lot of teams out there where you're like, they did not look good in their wins. And so yeah. I think you got to be pretty excited about the Rams from both a fantasy perspective and a reality perspective.
Yeah, they're actually doing things functionally in a forward-looking way. We've talked a lot about it with the play caller series and all of those things. Sean McVay clearly came to the table in 2023 with answers on how to attack defenses, how to do things a little bit differently. Immediately started incorporating that short side motion in week 2 after Miami did it. It was funny. Kyle Shanahan was talking about that in a press conference, how, Miami started doing that short side motion right away in week 1, and they started copying it right away in week 2. And Sean in LA started copying it right away in week 2. When they played each other, the Niners and the Rams, both of them had already integrated it by the very next week where they were kind of copying it. But Looking ahead at their schedule, home against the Cardinals, home against the Steelers. Would expect the Rams to win both those games. At the Cowboys, who, we don't know what the Cowboys are at this stage. At the Packers versus the Seahawks, and then at the Cardinals over the next 6 weeks or so. So a lot ahead of them. Or they actually have their bye in there in between that Packers and Seahawks run. So 4 games and then their bye. Definitely some winnable games for them coming up.
And then I don't know if it's like a huge statement victory by any stretch today for the Lions when you consider that. I mean, the Carolina Panthers have a long way to go, but I mean, the Lions, when they're the better team, are stomping people. And you look at their win against the Chiefs in week 1, where the Chiefs have now, gone out to 4-1 that game at Arrowhead. The fact that the Lions dropped that game to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks have been a little frustrating, at least for me personally, in the passing game. I think they have a lot to still work on offensively. You'd like to get even more out of Kenneth Walker. Obviously, I think Charbonnet has looked very impressive in his limited opportunities. That is a team in Seattle that when you consider that they're the team that put the loss on the Lions, I mean, that could be the game. The NFC West has risen again quickly as a dynamic division. And even though the Cardinals give up the monster game to Jamar Chase today, it was another game in which they competed really hard. There were some fluky plays in there that contributed to, this is an absurd thing to say. Outside of getting shredded by Jamar Chase, the Cardinals actually looked like the better team in that game. Obviously, that is
outside of the 15 catches for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns that the Bengals were able to get to their one good player. That literally,
then if you have one good player, I mean, should he be the focus of their team's defense?
It seems like probably, yeah. The big issue we had with the Bengals, and we talked about them recently, so they basically only have Chase and Higgins. Higgins not active in this game. Trent Irwin has 8 catches for 60 yards. Tyler Boyd goes 6 for 39 because at this stage of his career, he can't really get more than 6.5 yards per catch. Joe Mixon runs for 3.2 yards per carry on 25 carries and catches 4 passes for 13 yards. So
Joe Mixon almost seems like his goal is to get as many negative fantasy points over expectation as possible. I know that you love the fact that anytime a running back gets stuffed there at the goal line, that it smashes their FPOE.
It's beautiful.
I mean, he goes out there.
I had a tweet today, Sean, where I said the Bengals are down so bad, or they look so lost or whatever, that they resorted to giving Joe Mixon goal line carries because they had a stretch where they just gave him goal line carry after goal line carry. It did not work. Spoiler alert. Anyone who's listened to the show before knows that was not going to work. They got stuffed, turnover on downs at the goal line, and then I wanted to talk about the Bengals a little bit tonight, Sean, because we talked about him a little bit last week. You were a little concerned about him long term. I was saying I wasn't so concerned. I wanted to do my little victory lap, but you can't really do your victory lap when they were unable to score at the goal line, down 14-10 late in the second quarter, a big spot where they came out looking good early, and then they fall behind on 2 drives where the Cardinals are able to score 2 touchdowns and take the 14-10 lead. And the Bengals then, on their answer, a couple of drives later, turnover on downs, and then Joshua Dobbs throws an interception touchdown from out of his own end zone, gives the Bengals a 17-14 lead at the half. Bengals did have, a pretty strong second half, you can argue, but Dobbs has played really good football for most of the year, did struggle today, had some questionable decisions, threw a couple interceptions, also lost a fumble. And that was a big part of what allowed the Bengals to have the game they did. I don't think by any means that this game solves all of the Bengals' problem. They didn't dominate or anything. That's what I have in my notes as well.
Yeah, I mean, do you think the Bengals would have won if Dobbs doesn't throw that pick 6? I mean,
no,
it's one of the reasons, though, obviously, that you go for it on the 4th down at the 1-yard line is that if you don't get it, which you got a good chance that you will, but if you don't get it, the other team can make some huge mistakes down there. And we actually saw that in multiple games today. We got safeties all over the place. Week 5 was fantastic. We had weird, wild stuff going on everywhere. When you look at the game that Jamar Chase had today, he was wide open for a 4th touchdown. It would have been the second one, sort of, in terms of the ordering of it. But Joe Burrow threw the ball on the ground. I did think one of the things that was just strange today, when you consider how bad they've looked and some of the rhetoric about shutting him down, is that the mobility from Burrow was night and day today. And then he threw the ball with so much more intent and velocity today that you really, again, so much of it does seem to be that injury, but also coming out with a game plan where you throw the ball to Jamar Chase. I mean, you have obviously the long touchdown. That's a big part of getting to the huge line. They also did get in the ball, relentlessly all over the field. You and I were joking before the show about his hilarious sort of press conference answers last week where then Jamar
He's always
Chase
open.
is always open.
Yeah.
So,
but Shawn, I'm looking at their team stats right now.
Is it a situation here to also just like to be, I don't want to say to be fair, but to like reflect reality where it's actually a huge positive, sadly, that T. Higgins is just out in this game? I mean, T. Higgins has played very poorly this year.
No, he hasn't played well, but there's no way that it's helping the team. We just got done talking about, and we talked about it last week, they don't really have ancillary pieces that are helping. Jamar Chase has the game that he has, despite T. Higgins not being there. But I can't abide.
But the other element here is the Trenton Irwin deal, where
he looked good, but
I've obviously no longer playing because he's no longer worth anything in fantasy, but have been a huge Tyler Boyd fan. And I mean, he looks like someone who needs to be benched at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can watch Irwin play today and feel like Boyd out there on the field is doing anything but hurting them.
Yeah, Boyd obviously always somebody who was able to be very productive despite not being a particularly athletic player. Looks at this stage of his career like some of that athleticism has now gone into like the problematic area where he can't do enough. He doesn't have the quick twitch anymore either. So it's like, what are you doing? All you can do is catch, underneath passes. The Bengals 380 total yards today. That's great. It's probably a season high. I'm almost certain it's a season high. Actually, I am certain it is a season high. 79 total plays because of all the turnovers. It's only 4.8 yards per play. Coming into this week, they were tied, or they were at the bottom of the league in yards per play, 4.0. But 4.8 is like the equivalent of like the 23rd best team in the league. It's below average. The league average yards per play coming into this week per Pro Football Reference, 5.2. So the Bengals have this great turnaround game. They score 34 points. They have all these passing TDs. Joe Burrow throws for 300 yards, but it takes 79 plays in a way that their yards per play is still not good. I mean, that's and
they could have very easily lost this game.
Yeah, I'm just kind of putting a bow on what we're saying in terms of the short fields and the pick six being so helpful and all of those things. They definitely looked better. I want to be clear. I mean, I think they looked better, but they didn't look great. Jonathan Gannon said after the game that Connor might have got his foot stuck in the ground and twisted his knee. And they would know more on his status tomorrow. So we'll find out. It sounds like, though, it could be something that costs him some time. I mean, I would expect that it at least cost him a game or two. It's not like the Cardinals are going to rush him back or in a must-win game or anything. I wonder when their bye is. It could be the kind of thing that, looking ahead, they might. Well, no, they have one of the late buys. That's right. They have like a week 14 bye or something like that. It's not until December, so we'll see. It could be a couple weeks. It could be 1 week. I'm not entirely sure, but it didn't sound like it was minor. And obviously, none of the stuff that happened during the game sounded like it was minor. They immediately ruled him out. They went with Emery Demercado, who looks interesting, at least. I mean, vaguely interesting. He played alongside Kendra Miller at TCU, right? What are your notes on him?
In looking at him, there's nothing that jumps out as suggesting that he would be an NFL player. One of the things that is arguably a little bit frustrating about the Cardinals going into the season is that they have an older veteran running back who doesn't profile to be part of their next good team, but they also didn't get pieces that would be fun, like a Jaleel McLaughlin in Denver,
Yeah.
for example. So you're not developing anybody there. And yet at the same time, I mean, we do see players, I mean, it's very rare, but it's not impossible for a player to make a jump at the NFL level. One of the things was disappointing, certainly anybody who's playing James Conner, just for him, as a person as well. The injury frustrating. The matchup with the Bengals rush defense was a good one. And you do get DeMarcado scoring a touchdown at one point in this game. Obviously, that would have, in all likelihood, gone to Conner. It's a missed opportunity. Anytime you have a guy go out mid-game, that part is frustrating. But, and Ben, I mean, he had one of the great runs of the day where he bowling pinned off multiple tacklers, almost did, like a back handspring, and came out of it gaining more yards. He has looked completely reinvigorated in 2023 before today's injury. Just, I mean, anytime anybody gets hurt, it's sad. It's just too bad because he was playing such good football within the context of this Arizona Cardinals team that, yeah, they're bad. Yeah, they probably would actually prefer to lose these games, but man, they're playing so hard. I mean, Marquise Brown had a rough drop toward the end, probably didn't matter, but looked really fast on the plays that he was involved in. Rondell Moore looked, like one of the best athletes in the NFL. The unfortunate thing with Rondell Moore is that he is one of the best athletes in the NFL. The Cardinals have never figured out a way to use him, but 2 weeks ago, he looked pretty good. Last week, he scores a 0. Today, he looked good again. They had Michael
The
Wilson,
only way they figured out to use him is to give him a shotgun handoff or a direct snap today, and then fake, the reverse, and then we're going to turn him into a running back. It's the only way, but it's worked. It's got a couple long runs out of him.
But we saw a variety of fun plays to that extent today. We got the end around with the reverse, with the flip back to Jared Goff. I mean, the best play that Jameson Williams had today was flipping the ball back to Goff so he could throw a second touchdown pass to Laporta.
That's right. Yeah, and you were going to say Michael Wilson, and he had a really nice catch late in that game. Only the one catch in this game, but the Cardinals do have some fun pieces for sure. But I'm with you. It's a bummer that that was one of the big bummers of all draft season was that Arizona didn't have anyone that was really targetable late in drafts as like a 0 RB candidate. You mentioned Jaleel McLaughlin as a potential name they could have grabbed. There's a lot of names they could have grabbed. They went forward with Keontae Ingram and Emery DeMarcado, who did have the touchdown and maybe will be interesting. Somebody to certainly keep an eye on in waivers this week. Shawn, McLaughlin is a guy I want to talk about. McLaughlin, I still don't know how to say his name. I want to talk about him. I want to talk about Achane, two guys that you've been very, very high on, two of the small, speedy, explosive types that you're always talking about liking. You've been talking about this for a long time, these types of players, and they're showing us why you like these types of players. They're so fun to watch. You mentioned already Achane and some of what he's been doing. The comment you made, the joke you made, that his yards per touch is, competing with Tyreek Hill's on his own team to lead the league. And it's a little bit tough when you're a running back to try to compete with a wide receiver in yards per touch. And yet he's actually doing that. I, in my notes, wrote that there's few backs that can make Raheem Mostert look less explosive by comparison, but that's what Achane has done. Every time Mostert gets the ball in any offense I can ever remember him in, I'm like, wow, he's so much more explosive than every other back who's touched the ball in this game. And today I was like, wow, Raheem Mostert is slow. Like, this guy is hitting the hole a lot slower than the other running back.
Well, Raheem Mostert had a big burst play today that was called back on a penalty. But yeah. I mean, the thing that I've been comparing Achane to Chris Johnson somewhat sarcastically, throughout most of the draft.
That's what he looks like.
Yeah, and now it's like very clearly. And when I say sarcastic, I don't mean making fun of him, but just like it'd be very difficult for someone to be like the fastest guy at the combine, and Chris Johnson basically fastest running back ever. Achane, one of the fastest, like top couple guys ever since. But the difference here, and I really don't believe that this showed up that much in his highlights at Texas A&M. We'll have some college football aficionados who will probably disagree, and probably justifiably, because I don't see how it couldn't be the case. But one of the things that you see from him, even differently than Chris Johnson, Johnson had incredible vision, was able to see the hole, was able to hit the hole. And then when you have 4.2 speed, Once you're through, no one catches you and no one gets the angle. But one of the things they're doing with Achane, number one, they run it directly into the line. That can work for you. They have all of the different, zone running plays where they're getting him out on the edge, but they're also using him on end around types of plays where you're having to spend a long time running horizontal to the line of scrimmage before you can get downhill. And yet he does that. He gets to the edge. I mean, the players on the Miami Dolphins are able to do the things that you're not supposed to be able to do at the NFL level, which is to beat these guys to the edge and then take it the distance because the defenders can't get the angle on you. So both getting to the edge originally and then taking it the whole way. I mean, those two parts only exist when you have speed that is completely difference making, even at the NFL level. It's just that it doesn't exist. But the Dolphins have spent the last 3 years getting it with multiple. I mean, one of the kind of funny / sad things today was that if they hadn't seemed to be prioritizing getting Jalen Waddle involved, I mean, they might have scored 50 again, because basically like every turnover that wasn't an Achane fumble was Tua forcing the ball to Waddle. I mean, the pick six, like the 99-yard interception return, was one where Jalen Waddle was double covered, and Tua was like, we got him a touchdown earlier, but I really want this guy to feel like he's part of this offense. So, if not for the turnovers today, I mean, you have even more points. Probably they pulled back a little bit. It was almost like they committed some turnovers today because they knew the Giants were not going to pick up a first down in the game, and they wanted to be in position to justifiably break that like not real record of most yards ever through 5 weeks.
Did you wouldn't have, because you're always watching through the games, but Mike McDaniel was asked about that in his post game, and he said, mission accomplished. That's what we set out to do this offseason, was to put up a huge statistical record by the end of week 5, and we've accomplished what our goal was, which is a really great answer. I mean, you always get a lot of different ways that these coaches are going to approach things, but I thought that was pretty clever. Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins, we've talked about them a ton, and you continue to be very on point with Achane. The other undersized, explosive back we talked a lot about last week, maybe even more off the air than on the air. I wasn't really into spending a lot of fab money on McLaughlin. I felt like he was a guy we could pass on waivers. We didn't really have a lot of money, you and me, on our squads because of the Puka Nacua bids. But on a lot of the different teams where I co-managed with other people and things, I was not really going out of my way to get him. I got him in like a home league, but he looked fantastic in this game. My concern was not that he didn't look great, because he's looked great. And we talked about him on the show, the second show of last week, talked about how some of these types of unheralded backs have had success, compared him to the Danny Woodheads of the past. A lot of these guys that have Austin Eckler, I know you mentioned, guys that have come from smaller schools, have been very, very productive at smaller schools. That is the story of Jaleel McLaughlin. He's been productive at every stage of football that he's played, and he's now immediately being productive in the NFL, even though a couple of times where someone was able to square him up, it was like they knocked him back 4 feet. It was like he was a little 10-year-old, getting. There
were definitely some ragdoll hits in that game today.
There was some ragdoll hits, but you see him get very explosive. My concern was not about the player, it was about the situation. The big thing for me in this spot that I wanted to give you a lot of credit for and give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about, you've been saying since the offseason that the Broncos offense was going to be heavily run through the backs, and that a lot of the expected points and the fantasy scoring would come through the running backs. We see Samaje Perine in this game as well, 4 catches for 73 yards, get loose in the passing game a little, only 6 carries for 22 for him on the ground. But McLaughlin, 9 carries, 68 yards, has a 38-yard run is the highlight there. 3 catches, 21 yards, and it was a 22-yard touchdown. His other 2 catches went for -1 yard. But the TD was a fantastic play. He has to juggle it to bring it in because Russell Wilson can't, hit a running back from 5 feet away. And then the long run was a very explosive and exciting play. You see where, his skill set and the Sean Payton offense can mesh, and also saw it with Perine. Jerry Jeudy winds up with 6 catches for 50 yards in this game, but some of that was late kind of garbage time. And his biggest catch was garbage time. At one point, he had like 4 catches for 9 yards through like 3 quarters. and I bring that up because he's the only receiver that did anything in this game. Courtland Sutton 1 for 13. Marvin Mims has a really rough game, fumbles a punt, unable to catch a reverse toss that, and probably on Samaje Perine, kind of throws it over Mims' head. One of the more bizarre reverse tosses I've ever seen, where he just chucked it way higher than you need to be chucking it to a guy that you're handing the ball off.
That's one of the risks of those plays. We talked about the fun ones that worked out today. That was an absolute dagger for them in that game. That was brutal play. And I guess I didn't notice the how bad the Perine toss was. I mean, Mims has got to catch that and run a long way. But yeah.
Yes, he does. But I just thought, when you're that close and you're moving at each other, it's kind of hard to get the hands up that quick. That the last thing you want to do is get the ball like high. Usually, I mean, that's probably the first thing they tell you not to do, I would guess. I mean, I remember playing baseball growing up, but double play balls. They tell you not to get the tosses too high. Get them down low where they're manageable, where the hands are on, a shortstop toss to the second baseman toss to the shortstop. Same kind of concept, at least in my mind, as far as how I was associating it. It looked like it was tough for Mims to react to the ball being up around his head really quickly. At any rate, I want to hear your thoughts on the offense being so running back centric. They catch 7 passes for 94 yards. Like I said, the receivers don't really do much. Judy has a 23-yard catch in garbage time pretty much. I think he had a couple longer catches late where, I mean, I'm calling it garbage time. They were still in the game. They were trying to get back into it. They were pushing a little bit more. But through the flow of the game, through the 3 quarters where it was like neutral game script, Judy had nothing. Sutton had nothing. Mims had nothing. This was one of those games that looked very much like, in a tough Jet secondary that was defending those receivers, but very much like you have described how this offense might look at times. And McLaughlin was one of the biggest beneficiaries of that Sean Payton running back centric offense.
And the thing that we didn't necessarily get to see was how it will work with 3 players, because that's one of the things that you and I discussed is if it's split 2 ways, it can still very definitely work, especially if the more dynamic player gets more of the touches. If it ends up being split 3 ways and we're making the argument that Javonte Williams is going to be one of it's harder to say now one of the best backs in the NFL now that he's suffered this additional injury, which is not serious and yet will probably sap some more of the explosiveness that he needs. One of the issues he's had at the NFL level that I was not as concerned about, because you do have this collegiate track record where his breakaway rush score was through the roof. You contrast that with Najee Harris, who has the problems of being athletic and breaking tackles, but just doesn't generate any yards from it. So the athleticism doesn't translate. Yeah, I mean, you'd like to see that from Javonte Williams more at the NFL level. It doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to be a problem, but now that you have this contrast between his explosiveness and the rookie consistently, I mean, that is going to skew things in favor of the more explosive player when explosiveness is needed in this offense. So if they're using these 3 guys, my concern would be, and the concern that you articulated, is that even if they actually play pretty well, the total numbers from a fantasy perspective may not work. And if you're in a start-sit environment, it makes it tricky for you on a weekly basis. All of those things are bad. But I do think that we saw today the type of dynamism that McLaughlin can bring and what that means to an offense that needs it and is going to need it just in general, but also in some specific games. One of the things that we saw today is that, I mean, Courtland Sutton has gotten a lot of targets this season. He hasn't been very explosive. One of the things that you and I discussed again on the Resurrection Show was like, what is this going to mean for these guys? I mean, if Courtland Sutton is playing the Michael Thomas role, does that lock him into a certain kind of floor that is problematic for Judy? What happens when they actually bring Mims out there and use him as a receiver? I mean, one of the things that was weird in this game is he has the 2 really high-profile mistakes, but otherwise is not involved. I mean, he doesn't have the opportunity to make up for it by being out there and trying to stress the defense. This was a bad matchup coming in for the Broncos. There were these, vaguely off the field things as well, where you have Nathaniel Hackett on the other sideline and what all of that means. But the Jets have an elite defense that has been put under extreme pressure by how bad Zach Wilson is. But when you look at their overall numbers, you think back to how good they were last year, you realize they've already played the Chiefs and the Bills, which are going to knock down your numbers at least to an extent because those offenses are just so good.
But made both Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes look more mortal than most other defenses have been able to make those guys.
Yeah, and they spring the upset on the Bills. They actually very easily could have beaten the Chiefs last week. They dominated the Broncos receivers. And on the flip side of the ball, Patrick Surtain, I mean, we love Garrett Wilson. We desperately wanted to see what he would do with Aaron Rodgers. We're obviously not going to get that. He's still so good that there are going to be weeks where he breaks out. I mean, he got dominated by Patrick Surtain today. I mean, if you want to be a star, then even if you're frustrated that your quarterback is no good, I mean, you've got to play better. They could have easily lost that game.
I disagree. I just firmly disagree with this take. He beat him wide open on the sideline on one spot, and Zach Wilson throws the ball out of bounds and just leads him out of bounds. The late interception.
I did love the Zach Wilson sliding catch where he looked like he was on a slip and slide, and then he got up and celebrated like they just won the Super Bowl. I mean, that's how happy he is to make any catches in the current Jets.
The Garrett Wilson catch. Yeah. Yes. The late interception was a stop pattern. The broadcast broke it down afterward and said, I mean, Garrett Wilson almost makes a play on it, diving back in, and Surtain does make the interception on the play. But the broadcast is like, this throw has to be to the outside. It's thrown way too far to the inside. It's the exact route. The way that it stopped, you have to miss outside. And he threw it right at Surtain. And Garrett Wilson almost dove in front of him and intercepted it as the receiver, but wasn't able to. I thought he did.
Have to make the play.
Have to make the play. It's a terrible throw. It's a terrible, terrible throw.
How good does Garrett Wilson want to be?
I think he wants to be really good, and I think he's done some good things.
No, we just, of course. But when you look through where the Broncos are going to be this season and how that offense works, there is so much built-in value. One of the things that was kind of a little surprising to me as I worked on last week's Zero RB Universe and worked through the total EP numbers on a team level to the backs, is the Broncos don't jump out to you, or at least to me, having watched all of these games, as being one of the league leaders in receiving EP to the backs through the first 4 weeks. And yet they were. And then you talk about the receiving numbers that the two guys put up combined today. And I mean, one of the things that, again, is problematic here is that they're actually using Samaje Perine in this kind of big receiver role, which is sort of the role that allowed him to kind of take over for Joe Mixon in the very final games for the Bengals last year. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I think that you are correct in saying that there are issues with it, right? Because, I mean, not that Joe Mixon is necessarily any good, but he has basically taken every single touch for the Bengals again this year. And so for Perine to have been able to displace him from that role last year to be in the situation now, I mean, he's probably not going to completely vanish. Javonte Williams, I think, takes a lot of the receptions from both of those guys. If everybody is healthy and active today, I think he does a lot with them. But I do still think that we're going to get so much total value there, and that Russell Wilson throwing to the receivers, I mean, with Cortland Sutton really just not being good enough to be a high volume player, and with Jerry Jeudy, I mean, he's another one where they manufacture some touches to him. And like the thing with Jerry Jeudy is he's a great route runner. He does get open. He will make the catch. Doesn't have fantastic hands, but will make the catch. He's not like the caliber of athlete that you want to be getting the ball to behind the line of scrimmage. Let's take those plays out of the playbook. So until Mims is involved, you don't have the dynamism in the offense. One of the things that we saw today, Russell Wilson ran the ball a lot. I mean, they have the potential to be a high-powered offense that scores a lot of points. Just because they've struggled in the first 5 games with Sean Payton, and he's somehow managed to replicate kind of that first half of the Drew Brees, or maybe first 2/3 of the Drew Brees era, where like they scored at will and the other team scored at will on them. I mean, their defense is an absolute train wreck. Now you're going to get some of those touchdown runs from Breece Hall, but it felt inevitable that Breece Hall was going to get that play today. And, when your defense is that bad, you need to score a lot of points. I think that Russell Wilson and the Broncos are going to be one of the highest scoring teams in the league when we get done and we're 18 weeks through this thing.
They've been really good in terms of yards per play. They were again today. They just like Russ does weird stuff. They don't run a lot of plays. Like their play volume, they don't sustain drives. It's weird. Like for coming into this week, 5.9 yards per play was actually 6th highest in the league, but they've only run 227 plays. You have to go, because obviously teams that are efficient and run and are fit and are moving the ball are able to run a lot of plays. You have to go all the way down. Actually, it's the second fewest number of plays in the NFL. You have to go all the way down to the Jets, who are the only other team that has been worse in terms of total play volume. And they're at 4.7 yards per play. The other, 5 of the bottom 6 teams are all below 5 yards per play. Broncos at 5.9 yards per play should be able to sustain drives, and yet have done a bunch of weird stuff and have not really been able to sustain drives. And so they're mostly just getting like explosives. But today, another 5.4 yards per play in a loss in a game where they didn't play particularly well and had to settle for field goals. But 5.4 is still above league average. The Jets, 6.6 yards per play in this game, also had to settle for a bunch of field goals and things other than Breece Hall's long touchdown. They kick a field goal. They get a safety, a field goal. Breece Hall's long TD, then field goal, and then they get a fumble return TD at the end. That Breece Hall's long touchdown was their only offensive touchdown in the game. They score 31 points on a bunch of field goals. On 6.6 yards per play, I think on both sides, the issue is the quarterback play on like key third downs. They're not able to execute the drop back offense when they need to. But both of these offense have the players and the talent and the scheme on Sean Payton's side, as you were just describing, to like dial things up on 1st and 10s that are going to be efficient plays. And yeah, I'm with you. I think the Broncos offense surprised me a little bit today against the Jets, honestly, and I think can continue to at least be a high-scoring team and the way that their defense plays and everything, like you said. I mean, I think I'm right with you on that.
Man, we got that Breece Hall run. I was so sure we were going to get 1 or maybe 2 more touchdowns. Didn't quite come to fruition, but I mean, it's been frustrating. 5 weeks of the Breece Hall 2023 experience. But we're going to get more runs like this. We are going to get some big plays from Garrett Wilson. I mean, the thing, too, is that he's still going to be one of the 2 or 3 worst quarterbacks in the NFL, but Zach Wilson has played a little better, and even a little bit helps. I mean, not being – when you have like 31 QBs and the guys from like 26 to 31 are bad, and then you have Zach Wilson down like 3 or 4 tier breaks below that, that is not a viable way to play NFL football. I would put him back at like the 32nd QB this week, as opposed to like knocking him down tier break to tier break
45th QB.
Oh,
yeah, no, I agree with you. And I mean, but he still made some really tough plays. He doesn't let plays develop. He's standing in the pocket more. He's not bailing out of the pocket and running 30 yards backward, but he's throwing to the first open guy that he sees too frequently. The most glaring example in this game was the final play of the half. They're already clearly in field goal range. They have like 15 seconds on the clock, but they have no timeouts, and you cannot get tackled in the field of play. And he very quickly, from a clean pocket, throws to a tight end that's well away from the sideline, who catches it, gets tackled. I mean, and you can blame him for catching it. He shouldn't catch it. But when he's catching that pass, I think, he can't see behind him. He's got to think that he's got room to catch and turn and get out of bounds. And he didn't have room to turn and get out of bounds.
It is one of those, though, where, I mean, he's got to just bat that ball down. But, like, think about what signal that sends to, like, everybody about the throw that your quarterback just made when you bat that ball down.
You can't catch this. He got tackled. He runs to try to get the ball spotted in time to get it spiked. They're not able to get it spiked because they didn't have time to get it spiked. I'm sure the coaches were telling Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson has to know anyway. You have no timeouts. You cannot complete a pass in the field of play. It has to either be a shot to the end zone or a throw out of bounds, period. You're going to kick a field goal. Plenty field goal range. It was a 4-yard completion that was tackled in the field of play and did not allow them to get a field goal attempt. And they were down 13-8 at the time. Just like absolutely no excuse for it. And my issue, the biggest issue for me on this play, apart from the obvious game management stuff, is that he was in a clean pocket. And it's like he's like been taught now that he needs to stay in the pocket, but he's throwing to the first open guy he sees. He's not allowing the plays to develop down the field. He's not willing to just stand in the pocket as it is like clean around him. This is something that can't, back in the BYU days, people would point out that he would he got great offensive line play at BYU, but he would bail out of clean pockets and then like throw on the run and make this great play. And there was, I know film people that were always like, yeah, I mean, that ended up being a great throw on the run to his open receiver, great play. But like, he didn't need to be on the run. He ran out of a clean pocket for no reason. He just gets antsy really quickly.
Because he's really athletic and because he has a really big arm. And I mean, it can work sometimes at the college level. The thing that's so frustrating about, as you're mentioning, that play at the end of the half is that like this is not a guy who has a limited number of reps at the NFL level. He's played a lot, and yet in order to process the amount of information that you have to work through, he's having to simplify the types of mental like decisions, and they get too simple that they don't account for what the game environment is or other elements in order to be able to process quickly enough. And that's, again, it underlines when you see some of the plays that he makes and you contrast it to how he actually was a good enough player in college to be drafted that early. You see some of the plays that Kenny Pickett makes. It reminds you to always have at least a little bit of skepticism. I don't mean skepticism in a bad way, but just understand that a lot of the quarterback elements are not going to cleanly transition or translate from college to the NFL. It's such a complex position, the information, the visual information, the physical athletic information that you have to process and not just process, but then execute a physical play yourself and dominate this environment to be a successful NFL quarterback. It's so immensely difficult.
It's so hard.
It's one of the reasons that CJ Stroud's performance has been.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
So incredible. And then today, I mean, not to say that he played poorly, but you again see that like it's a work in progress. Every game is not going to be amazing.
But everything you were just saying was making me think how incredible what CJ Stroud is doing. You put that so well, and it is such a good way to talk about what CJ Stroud has done. And also to take one more opportunity to mention that the S2 cognitive test is nonsense, because that said that CJ Stroud couldn't do all of the things that you just said, or it portended to say that exact thing, that all of those really complicated mental things you have to do, that they're still simplifying for Zach Wilson now. And he does have a lot of NFL reps, as you said. It has been no problem for CJ Stroud. He gets it innately. He understands football, and whatever that test was that claimed that he wasn't going to be able to because of the way that they tested him clearly doesn't test what it's trying to test. I mean, I do not want to hear about that test ever again. I'm sorry. Like you can't pretend to test for this exact thing, which is highly important and is why people wanted to give that test credibility, because what it's trying to test for does matter. But you can't pretend to test for that and say that, CJ Stroud does horrible and he's the guy that has all of that in spades. You're not testing for the right thing.
Yeah. It's going to be a difficult element to pull out. There are so many things that you can do from a simulation perspective to help people grow and learn with all of these tests. And at some point, I think there probably will be, in the same way that everything continues to develop, we'll get some good information from some of these types of things, but that one is certainly a weird dynamic. And again, I always just think back to that game against Georgia where he was dominating them and Georgia had to resort to a cheap shot to make it through and win that national title. Apologies to the Georgia fans. Their team.
Yeah, they're not going to like that one. They're not going to like that one.
But Ben, such a fun week. We mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think, that it was a blast to watch football. It's a blast to watch football again today. 2023 had a wonderful draft environment. These last 2-3 weeks has had a wonderful game environment on Sundays. I wish all the players would stay healthy. It's always heartbreaking. People get hurt, but otherwise, football's back. Fantasy football is back. I love to see those 205 to 197 scores as opposed to people, including, us winning like 112 to 109. Winning is winning. You like that, but that's not the scoring environment that makes fantasy football fun.
No, it's way more fun when we get all these points. I'm thrilled. I know I've talked a lot about the Cover 2 shells and all this stuff. It is so cool to see what we're seeing I have some thoughts on why we're seeing it. There's still so much more to like learn and understand about what offenses have been able to do. But the result that the offenses are able to score a lot more points is what we want. Like last year was a frustrating year. Like we were having a hard time at times doing the show, and I was having a hard time writing the articles because it's just like, man, football's not that fun to watch when people can't score points. It's been today was great. I mean, it was so much fun. It's so much more fun to analyze the different offenses when things are actually happening. Yeah, couldn't agree more. What a great week.
So hopefully everybody got the points that you needed today. Hopefully you are in that 180 to 220 point category. If not, we hope you get what you need on Monday Night Football. That'll do it for our Sunday night / Monday morning reaction episode of Stealing Bananas. As always, I'm Shawn Siegele. With me is Ben Gretch, whom you can follow at Yards Per Gretch. Make sure, if you haven't yet, that you get over, you sign up for Stealing Signals. Got a couple of big pieces coming out this week, and Ben did a bonus article as well last week on Wednesday, so you got pieces 3 days in a row there from him. You can also sign up for Stealing Signals Gold, the YouTube version, where Ben actually breaks down your questions in person. That exercise, always a lot of fun. Sign up for Stealing Lines, the betting project with Dalton Cates. We'd love to have you guys over there at RotoViz. And some of the guys are breaking out some articles that are pretty impressive. I've really enjoyed our in-season content this season. Coupon code RVRadio 2023 at checkout. Leave us a rating and review. That really helps us with the various algorithms. You guys are the best. Good luck tomorrow. We love you. Talk to you soon.